Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast E3 week. Today we're diving into Xbox. As always, I'm joined by Dom.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
And Jordan.
Please be excited for E3.
Unlike our other E3 podcasts you're going to see, we don't have a guest, which is fine. I can talk about Xbox all day long. So,
Nobody likes us, we smell too bad.
We got a guest right here! So if you're not familiar, if you haven't listened to any of our E3 coverage this week, the way we're going to do it is we're going to talk about Xbox's conference last year, and then we're going to talk about what our expectations are for this year's conference, and then we're going to go into the best part, really. The whole reason we do this is the predictions.
Wait to get into this.
So basically, I'm going to go over the conference as it happened, step by step, day by day.
E3's best conference last year.
Yes, so it started off with the Xbox One S. The conference opened. Phil Spencer gave kind of a somber sorry and condolences to the tragic Orlando event that happened, and then it cut to obviously the total tonal shift, and then it switched over to them unveiling the Xbox One S. Going into the conference, it was basically leaked by that point. They're coming out a slim version of the Xbox One. We didn't know what it was going to look like. We didn't really know what the price was going to be. We heard rumblings that it was going to have an integrated power supply, which is one of the big issues with Xbox for a while, is the big power brick right on the outside. Turns out the Xbox One S looked sleek, looked nice. It was white with hints of black, obviously, on the trimmings and stuff like that. Really cool design. Way better than the original Xbox One. Had an integrated power supply, which was also huge. A lot of people were happy about that. Touted true 4K with a 4K Blu-ray as well. And a price point of $299, which I thought was sweet. I thought the launch of the Xbox One S went over really well. We got the sales numbers there for the fall for like 3 or 4 months. Xbox One S was outselling PS4, which is really cool. I think it was a smart move for Xbox to let them put out a cheaper unit on the market. What are your guys' impressions of the Xbox One S? Because it was a console release last year, right? We talked about the PS4 Pro on Sony's conferencing. So what did you guys think about the Xbox One S?
It's cool. It's a good box. Real good box that they made.
So, by what do you think? Are you asking like what we think of it now, almost a year later?
Both. You can give me your initial
impressions?
thoughts on at the conference, and then retrospectively how you felt about it.
I thought at the conference it was great, and that they showed it off well. It was kind of just like a trailer for it, and they didn't spend too much time. And it was, I think, a perfect way to start the conference because it's exciting, but it's not, blowing up anybody's mind. So it was just that perfect middle of the road right there to start the conference. As far as looking back a year later, I think it was just as good of a move as they could have made at that point. And I think, Phil Spencer would have told you at that point that he knew. I mean, obviously, they weren't going to outsell PS4 lifetime by that point, but they knew that they could gain some ground, and I think they've done a really, really good job as far as hardware and updating Xbox Live, not so much with their software titles, but in this past year I think they've done a great job continually improving Xbox Live. Now we've got Game Pass coming through, and then obviously improving on the hardware with Xbox One S, and then now we have we've had the Digital Foundry video where they've gone through and evaluated the Scorpio, and it looks like Digital Foundry's happy with it, and they say that everything looks good so far from what they can tell. So that indicates to me that they're also succeeding in bringing better hardware to the market. So yeah, man, I think, like I said, I don't think they could have done it any better with that little piece of hardware.
Yeah, it was really quick, really sleek, got to the point, got out, right? I think that was a great way to handle a hardware unveil, which, not jumping into the second half of the show, but I do think that kind of lends to what we can expect for Project Scorpio, hopefully.
Sure. Big boy!
Next up, they talked about Gears of War 4. Hadn't come out yet. They announced Play Anywhere, which is a service where if you buy it for Xbox One, you also get a copy of it essentially for Windows 10, and you can your achievements and your game saves go between both. And they also shut off the Gears of War Elite controller. which was really cool.
Yes.
Gears of War 4 came out to positive reviews. It was a good release. A lot of people felt it didn't do anything too different from the normal Gears of War formula, but I think people were pretty positive on it. I think arrow up on Gears of War.
It was fantastic. It was an awesome game.
Yeah, I mean, you're the only one out of us three that played it. I just never got around to it. Not that I didn't want to play it. It just wasn't in the budget. You know?
It was extremely, I think, not necessarily underrated because it did well critically, but like underhyped, I guess. Like no one seemed to talk about it.
Well, see, I think that's where I come in because I was planning on buying Gears as long as it, wasn't broken or whatever at launch or around launch, I should say. But then the reviews coming out and saying that they really hadn't done anything special with it, when it seemed to me like that was what they were trying to say was, hey, we're bringing Gears back, but this is, it's Marcus's son, and it's a soft reboot essentially, and we're going to put a spin on the series that maybe you weren't expecting, or that would be a pleasant surprise. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that was necessarily the case. So they did lose a sale on me, and I think that I feel like people would just, with the cancellation of Scalebound and killing off Lionhead and Fable Legends and some of the other issues they've had with software titles recently, I think people would just be more forgiving of them at this point if Gears had been a little more innovative.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I do think Dom's kind of correct in the notion that it was a great game and it didn't get the focus that a lot of other games did. Like there was a couple of, I'm just going to use this for relative terms, whatever. There was a lot of 7s and 8s and even like lower 9s that were in the discussion in the running for Game of the Year, and it didn't seem like Gears of War 4 never was in discussion, even though it was kind of around that same thing. It's kind of weird that it got that treatment, and I do think, it's partially because it didn't seem that it evolved too much on the Gears of War formula, but I also think it's just because it was an Xbox exclusive, and a lot of the games media, at least the prominent voices, are PlayStation first. I'm not saying they have a bias, but when they're talking about the games that mean the most to them, I think they're more likely to have a 8 from a PlayStation franchise mean a little bit more to them than an 8 from Xbox, I think that a lot of like the Last Guardian votes, I didn't play the game, but I saw a lot of coverage and a lot of gameplay of that game. That game to me never once said Game of the Year, but to some people it did. And I think that it's just that people were more likely to hoist Last Guardian than they were Gears of War 4. So it was really weird.
Maybe that's because it is, even though it does look like it controls like a PS2 game, it is innovative in the sense that there aren't very many exploration games where you're, trying to use your giant dog companion to help you through these puzzles and such. There's really nothing at all even close to Last Guardian as far as type of game out there. And so I think that's why.
Well, there's not many PS2 games coming out now.
Right. I think we're at a point in video games where people have played the third-person shooters, being Gears of War and such like that, and they've played the first-person shooters being Call of Duties and Halos, and I just think that gamers really want new and innovative, interesting experiences to have, and so I think that's where they fail with Gears of War.
Yeah. Next up, we have some games that we don't need to get too deep into because I don't think any of us have huge impressions on. Killer Instinct, they announced General Rom as a guest character. Pretty interesting. It's Xbox's own fighting game. They did 2 seasons. So they did the regular season when it released. They did season 2. Season 3 came out in 2016 to kind of like hush. And I think they're kind of moving on from Killer Instinct, it seems like. Next up, they showed off Forza Horizon 3, which looked phenomenal. The racing games always are the prettiest looking games. That game sold really well. It reviewed very well. Recently, there was the Hot Wheels expansion that came out for it, which people are loving. And I think is a really cool cross between brands. I think that was a huge get for Microsoft to have Hot Wheels tracks in a racing game as beautiful as Forza Horizon. So I think that was huge. Next up, Recore. This was a game that looked like it had a promise. It's another example of maybe older Japanese developers not translating well to the current day or trying to live too much in their past. We had this with Mighty Number 9. Recore, I think, has a solid ground. I think as an IP, it's very interesting. They have a lot of things that they can do. And for me personally, looking forward to the future of Recore, I hope it makes a complete genre change. from the kind of arcadey shooter-ish thing that it was, arcadey platform shooter. I think that taking it more in a grounded direction and a more narrative-based direction, I think will be better for that game. I think it
so
was.
You do think there is a? You think that's a franchise now? You do think there is a future for?
I wouldn't say
for 2 or whatever.
I think they earned their money back enough. I don't think Microsoft put that much money into ReCore. I think they did get their money back.
$40 price point.
Exactly. I think it worked out fine. Now, I'm pretty sure they wanted it to be a success, but I think they were just testing something. Microsoft doesn't really work with Japanese developers that much, and the last 2 times they kind of worked with people who are at least Japanese that headed the games, Scalebound got canceled, and ReCore was kind of a disappointment. So I do think that the next ReCore will have a tonal shift, and it might even have a complete genre shift. But I do think it's promising. The game didn't review very well. I think it sold fine. But I do see a future for ReCore, and I think there are enough interesting ideas in that IP that it can move forward.
Real quick, just to build off of something that you said with them dealing with Japanese developers, personally, I think that I don't think that Xbox needs to just jump out of Japan, but I think they just need to give up on trying to win that audience over and trying to make Xbox a thing in Japan. Like, have it there, maybe even make it so that it's kind of rare, that if you want to get one, you got to kind of find it, because then it would be kind of a commodity. But other than that, I haven't seen in the fruits, they've been trying this since like Blue Dragon and stuff like that, and I'm just not seeing the fruits of that labor. So I'm just wondering if maybe they could just concede that to Sony and Nintendo and just focus their efforts on the markets that actually care about what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they shouldn't go after the Japanese market, but I do think they should go after Japanese RPGs that play to a Western audience. You know what I'm saying? I still think that they should go after Persona 5S games and stuff like that. Those are huge in Japan. I know it's a bad correlation to make, but I do think that maybe the next Blue Dragon is more Western leaning, and it isn't going for maybe traditional JRPG, but it is Western RPG with JRPG influences. Something like that, maybe, kind of tweaking what they already have. The odd thing when I was doing research, did you know, fun fact, Microsoft Studios published Call of Duty Black Ops 3 in Japan. Not Activision. Weird, right? Very weird. Speaking of odd, the next thing we saw for the Microsoft press conference was the Final Fantasy...
Hold on a second, Jared. Sorry to interrupt. I apologize. But you just broke my brain. So, Japanese copies of PS4 Black Ops 3. What's the deal with that?
No clue. Good call. I have no idea, but all I read was that Microsoft Studios published Call of Duty Black Ops 3 in Japan.
There's like, I'm sure Black Ops 3 sold plenty on PS4 in Japan.
Yeah, maybe if they wanted to sell it so maybe they published the Xbox versions and Sony had to publish the PlayStation versions. Maybe Activision made it so if you wanted it out on your platform in Japan, you had to publish it yourself. That's probably what happened. But going back to speaking about weird and interesting, next up we had the Final Fantasy 15 demo. That was odd. It was the Titan fight. Very bad demo. Probably the worst showing of Final Fantasy 15 at E3 last year. Unfortunately, it was on Microsoft stage. Once again, this is them like, hey, we want to appeal to the Japanese audience. We're gonna have Final Fantasy on our stage, and of course, we get screwed with the worst presentation of the game.
Yeah, they just turned into a meme.
Yeah, it was a poor. It just sometimes that's how it breaks. Speaking of getting the poop end of the stick. Next up, we saw Battlefield 1, which wasn't a bad game, but it was the trailer we had already seen two times.
Yeah.
That was very unfortunate that we saw it again. It was the same trailer, didn't even do a different cut, didn't even do a different tune, anything. It was literally beat for beat the same trailer, which was very upsetting.
You guys think that's going to happen this year? We're going to have a trailer that gets repeated?
Destiny 2. I think it's going to be Destiny 2. I think it's going to be the trailer that we see over and over and over again. Maybe Far Cry 5 as well. And Battlefront 2. I don't know. There's a couple of games that you could just be like, yeah, they could feel like throwing that into every conference. Next up was a huge block that I think was very important. To some people, might have seemed boring, but I do think this was a very important section for Xbox. And this is when they announced all the Xbox Live improvements. This is when they announced the background music. This is when they announced Cortana. This is when they announced the clubs feature, which means there's groups that you can use. And I remember there being a news article that came out about a month ago in June, or we're in June, in May, sorry, in May, where they were talking about how that feature is one of the most used features, and it's actually one of the top 20 social networks now. The clubs on Xbox, because so many people use it and create groups and stuff. Yeah,
fucking A.
I actually use it from time to time. When I was grinding achievements in Dark Souls 3, I went to the Dark Souls club. There's a specific Dark Souls achievements club, and I went in there and I was like, hey, I need to get the symbol of Avarice, which is the Mimic Chest helmet that helps you get better drops and stuff like that for achievements. And yeah, I was able to hook up with somebody and they helped me out. So they're very useful. I've used them myself. I think they're really good. Next up, looking for group, which is a feature that Destiny 2 announced, which I think they call it like, what is it? I forgot their term for it, but yeah, it's basically you're looking for people. This is huge. This is kind of like, this thing was almost essentially created for Destiny itself. Of you want to go into a raid on Destiny, you don't have 5 other friends to go into. You have to go to Reddit threads or the Destiny forums and all these.
Yeah, God forbid they have matchmaking in the fucking game.
Exactly. And even if there is matchmaking games, it's maybe you want a co-op partner for a co-op game. Different things, right? So I think looking for group is huge. I haven't used that feature too much just because I have a pretty good stable of friends. And if I'm looking for groups for achievements and stuff, I usually go to the clubs. But I think it's a huge feature. Also, the last feature that hasn't been implemented too much, but I could definitely seeing it have a huge future is Arena. This is their multiplayer focused place where they can create tournaments and that kind of stuff. I think Call of Duty going back to a more grounded type of multiplayer will be huge for this as well, because I remember when Game Battles was huge when Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was out.
Oh man, Game
and
Battles.
I think since then people have not been away from that. I think people still do that kind of stuff, but I think this next Call of Duty has the potential to bring in a lot of old fans who have been gone for a while. So I think Arena can be huge. Next up, we saw the presentation for Minecraft in Oculus with John Carmack, which is funny because this is the guy that worked at id that was responsible for Doom and a bunch of other games, Rage, and he was playing Minecraft in Oculus. Kind of odd, but that was the first time we saw the partnership that could be possible. You know, PlayStation has PSVR, and we were wondering, well, is Xbox going to jump into the VR space? And then we had this presentation with Oculus, and they're partnering with Oculus on Minecraft, so it kind of puts one and one together, right, of like, if Xbox is going to have VR with their new powerful console, it's probably going to be Oculus. And we can get into that in the second part of what we talk about expectations. Next up, I want to go through these and then we can get to, you know, what we can expect. We had the custom controllers, which I think was huge. Another thing that maybe not be a super crazy announcement, but I thought was cool. I think Sony would pay dividends doing something like this for people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it was a really cool announcement. I was like, oh, you can just create your own controllers. You know, a lot of third-party websites where they're like, this is our whole business model, thanks, but yeah. I thought it was
Not
huge.
their problem.
Exactly. They also unveiled, speaking of the custom controllers, when they announced the Xbox One S, they announced the new and improved Xbox One controller, which has the grips on its on the backs, better Bluetooth support.
Not better Bluetooth support, but Bluetooth support. Right?
Bluetooth support, yeah. It was a greater distance for connection, I think, for the IR sensor is what I was thinking of, because that was also introduced as well. Next up, we had the ID at Xbox block, which they talked about Inside, which came out and was phenomenal. I think I would put it up there as my game of the year, up there with Overwatch and Dark Souls 3. Then they showed off Cuphead, which we can have a whole conversation about. Below, Outlast 2, which came out to really good reviews. Deliver Us to the Moon, which I'm not sure released. And then Flint Hook, which is kind of like a nice little indie surprise a lot of people are talking about, or were talking about 3 weeks or so when it came out. Maybe longer than that, maybe like a month and a half. I don't know, time escapes me. We also had the section where they talked about the Xbox preview program, which is essentially Steam Early Access. They showed off We Happy Few, which still hasn't had a full release yet, which we could possibly see this year. The Gwent card game, which recently, in the last like 2 or 3 weeks, had its open beta come out. They showed off Tekken 7, which hasn't come out yet. Dead Rising 4, which came out to subpar reviews, wasn't very good. They showed off Scalebound, which we now know is canceled. Sea of Thieves, which is probably going to get a release date this year, hopefully. Halo Wars 2, which came out to decent reviews, didn't sell very well, but I think it sold what they expected for a Halo Wars game. And then they finished off the presentation with Project Scorpio, which is a good place to kind of connect the two. They ended their conference last year with Project Scorpio, and we talked about how they opened up last year with Xbox One S. I've been talking for a while, so I want to know, do you guys think they open up this show with Project Scorpio?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they'd have to, because you don't want to show off 2 or 3 games and everybody's confused about, well, is it Scorpio? Is it running on Xbox One? What's the frame rate? Yada, yada, yada. And I think if you just go ahead and say, this is what Scorpio is, this is how the games are going to run, this is how it interacts with, Xbox One, and then from there you can move forward.
So I got a hot take. So they did announce also recently that they're going to be streaming their conference, and I think it's exclusively through their streaming service. I can't remember what it's called.
Mixer, yeah. And Xbox One S. Mixer and Xbox One S, you can watch it in 4K.
So you can actually stream their conference in 4K and HDR. So that seems like a pretty big hint of what they're going to want to show off, right? So
exactly.
I'd look for, a lot of Scorpio attention right off the bat.
Well, the thing that benefits too is the hardcore Xbox guys who are interested in 4K off the bat. What it does is, if they're already interested in 4K, they more than likely already have an Xbox One S, and they already more than likely have a 4K TV or monitor, right? Which means that them saying, hey, you can watch this here if you want, means that the people who can see the difference will see the difference. You know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to get through, but I think you guys understand what I'm trying to say.
No, I think they're playing to the strengths of their audience, is what you're saying.
Exactly, and this goes back to the whole Digital Foundry situation of like, let's have them talk about all the techie stuff, whatever. People trust them, we'll have them do it. I think this is a way of like, yo, if you want to see the 4K stuff, you can watch it here and here in 4K, And that's not them being at the show where they might say it, but I doubt they are. We're like, well, if you're watching this now in 4K, then it's in 4K. That makes absolutely no sense. You get that message out beforehand, and then people can see it for themselves, right? And what that does is, the people, like we said, who get to see the benefit. For the people who don't get to see the benefit, they don't feel like they're getting gypped because the games they're seeing still run on their Xbox One, and they see the same thing for both, right? Which I think is huge. I think a good kind of breaking off point here, and we'll get into everything else because there's a lot to talk about. Project Scorpio is going to be a powerful console. People have said that it can probably run VR decently well. Better than PlayStation VR. Not that PlayStation VR is bad, but it's obviously a weaker console running VR, so a stronger console is going to run VR better. It's just obvious math. They showed off Minecraft on Oculus. Do you think we'll see Minecraft VR? And more importantly, one of the things that I've been hinting at for a while since Todd Howard was in that announcement of Project Scorpio, are we seeing Fallout VR on Microsoft stage?
I mean, I can... We're going to get into my predictions if I start talking too much.
Okay,
but,
okay.
So I'll let you guys answer most of that.
Okay. It can even be simple of, do you think Oculus or VR will even be on Microsoft stage? We don't need to get into specifics of Minecraft and Fallout.
I actually do. I do think we're going to see some Oculus stuff because I think they, having a console this powerful coming out this fall and them being Microsoft and them not having any VR support, I think would look really bad because, obviously PCs run Oculus and Vive, and they've had this, they've already had, connections to Oculus with, as you mentioned, the Carmack thing with Minecraft, and then every Oculus comes with a Xbox One controller, I think, right? So that's, clearly they've seeded that partnership.
So if I was planning this conference, my plan, if we had to include Project Scorpio, which obviously it's included, it's weird for me to say have, and then you have to include VR, right? The way I would go about it very loosely would be you start off with Project Scorpio, get that out of the way, boom, name, price, release date, bada bada bada, boom, right? Go into all the games, talk about all the games, services, all that stuff. At the very end, I would end with, we've decided to have a partnership with Oculus. Oculus VR is playable on Project Scorpio, announce a bundle or something, right? And then show off Minecraft VR, right? People are like, oh, that's awesome, Oculus VR, that's a cool Minecraft, whatever. And then do the one more thing, and then Todd Howard comes out on screen and be like, hey, I want to show you guys something. And then it's like exclusively on Oculus, and then it's the Fallout VR. I think that'd be super cool as like a one more thing. Just because...
And Fallout VR is a confirmed thing, right?
Yes, 100% confirmed. Yeah, Todd Howard already said it's a confirmed thing. And the reason I keep going back to them having a partnership is because it's really... I understand people are talking about Microsoft wants to control the day and have a whole day to themselves, and I do think that's part of it. But I do think another huge part of it is they want to go before Bethesda, because I do think there's a partnership there. And it makes no sense for Bethesda to talk about Fallout VR and if it has some kind of weird partnership with Xbox or on the Scorpio, and we don't even know what the Scorpio is yet, you know? I do think there's something there to some extent. I do think there's going to be some partnership there between Bethesda and Microsoft of something happening. It may not be VR, but that's my most likely...
Yeah, I think you're right, Jared. But then, Jordan, you brought up that, you know, Microsoft is wanting something VR on their Xbox system, right? I think to a much greater extent, Oculus wants to be on Microsoft systems, right? Because they've been not selling. I mean, it's a first gen, it's a whole new thing, so the expectations couldn't have been too high. But when you look at the sales figures for Oculus and Vive, it's kind of like, what the hell? You guys have to be eating money right now.
Look at how Microsoft's able to sell products and services. They do it very well. There's a reason why, you know, Xbox is a part of Microsoft, but PlayStation is pretty much everything to Sony. Like, we've seen the sales numbers.
I disagree with that. I think I've heard that a lot recently about people thinking that it's the end of the world for Sony, and I just feel like they're not as big as Microsoft, but they're a very big and well-respected Japanese tech company outside of PlayStation.
No, but if you look at the sales numbers, Jordan, they've actually their stock prices keep dropping, and they've actually lost in a profit margin 6%, and they've been losing every year.
And I get that, but I'm just saying I don't think Sony, the company, is shutting down anytime soon. I think they have too many arms and legs in their consumer electronics, especially their audio equipment. Then you have Sony Pictures, which I think, if anything, if there's anything that's really screwed up right now, it's Sony Pictures. But even that, I think, you know, they have Spider-Man as a property, and they've screwed him up, but they still have him as a property, and they're still making money off of him. So I just don't see this doomsday clock ticking that quickly for Sony in general outside of PlayStation.
Not to mention, it is a big diversified company. So if everyone's worst fears came true and all the hyperbole was real, PlayStation would continue to exist in some form. It might not be a part of Sony, right?
Yeah.
Who knows what that might look like, but...
Back to Xbox. Since this is our Xbox conference. So next up, I want to talk about the indie games we know about so far specifically. Obviously, we can have a huge discussion on Cuphead. That game needs a release date. If they show that game this year and it doesn't have a release date, I think they're doing it wrong. The only reason that game should even be at E3 if it has a release date. I think we can all agree on that. Below, I think, is huge.
Yeah, if they show that at all without saying, hey, it's coming out like this fucking summer, you know.
Shadow drop.
It needs to be out, in my opinion, before the 1st of October, absolutely.
Hot take. Yeah. I'm calling it right now. Cuphead, Shadow dropped at E3. Boom.
Next up, Below, which is Capybara Games game. A really cool, over-the-top kind of Dark Souls-inspired adventure game where you're a very tiny person in a very big world. That game was initially announced to come out last year. They went dark, but I think they handled it really well. They said, you know, we basically made our release date too soon, and people were asking, well, like, when's the release date? And they're like, I don't know, we'll tell you when we're done. And I think that was a good way of handling it, of like, we're not going to tell you, oh, you'll hear about us in 3 months, you'll hear about us soon. They're just like, well, you'll hear about us when the game's done. So that's another game that I think the only way that shows up at E3 this year is if it's already ready to go.
Unfortunately for both of those games, I just think that they've burned the whole hype candle all the way down.
I wouldn't compare them. I think Cuphead is definitely in that. I don't think Below. I think Below got some hype, but I don't think people saw Below as often, and it wasn't talked about by the media as much. I'm not saying...
I guess I'm just talking about those of us who have known about it and have been excited for it. Like, I'll just speak for myself personally. I think my excitement for both of those games has just absolutely dwindled. Not that I'm not excited for them, it's just I don't have any more juice to keep putting into thinking about, oh, Cuphead and Below, they're going to be such great experiences. Like, I'll just worry about that when they're out, not even about to be out, you know.
Exactly. The last big indie game that we already know about anyways in terms of Xbox is Tacoma, which is Steve Gaynor's game, the guy who made Gone Home, which is like an indie classic. This is exclusive to Xbox, which is also huge. Console exclusive anyways. I think this is another game. I think this is a game we see this year, and it does have a release date. Steve Gaynor's talked about how they're working really hard on this game. They're closing in on a release date. And out of anybody, I think Steve Gaynor, if you know about him at all in the industry, he seems like a very smart guy and up-to-date guy, and he understands the problems with announcing a game's release date and then delaying it. It's different when you're Rockstar, delaying Red Dead 2. When you're an indie game, you can take all of the wind out of your sails, and I think he understands that. So, once again, Tacoma is a game that if we do see it at E3, it will have a release date.
Do you think that Tacoma's going to eventually get over to PlayStation?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think as soon as Inside. I think more of a Witness situation, where Witness was like 8 or 9 months, whereas Inside was like a month. I think it's more of a Witness situation than it is a Inside situation, but I do think it'll come over to PlayStation. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be trapped to Xbox. The smaller indie games, Tacoma is a smaller indie game, but the recognition Steve Gaynor got for Gone Home, I think it's more than just a new indie game, right? I do think that's it's going to be maybe 3/4 of a year, I would assume, if I was a betting man. So we covered the indies. The next portion I want to cover is what I would say are the big 3 Xbox games that we have already seen. We'll get into the rest of them, but so Crackdown 3, Sea of Thieves, and State of Decay 2. We'll get into each of them individually, and then I have a bunch of notes for stuff like Forza Motorsport and stuff like that. But so Crackdown 3, we'll get into this one first. Didn't see it at last year's show. A lot of people were, going crazy and saying the sky is falling, that this game's never coming out. And I think a lot of that wasn't necessarily people being ignorant, but I do think it was people just not drawing the correlation between Project Scorpio and Crackdown, right? Crackdown 3 was presented as using cloud computing and having destructible environments, and it did have some development issues, and I do think that the reason we didn't see it last year was because they're planning a big unveil with it specifically for Scorpio, using its power. That's a game that, unlike a racing game where it looks very pretty, showing off the performance of a game in Scorpio I think is huge as far as what a game can actually do or be. And I think Crackdown is going to be their marker for that. I think that's going to be their, Forza Motorsport 7 looks pretty. This game shows you the power of what a game can be with Scorpio, with destructible environments and all of that stuff. Am I alone thinking Crackdown 3 is going to be like one of the premier Scorpio titles this fall? Like, what are your guys'
See, that's my thing, is you have to have, even though Scorpio is an iterative hardware release, I don't think it is. Yeah, I don't think they're going to go back on what they said last year about still being able to play, still being able to have your Xbox One and the games that come out will still be playable on Xbox One. I think that's still going to be true. But I feel that they absolutely need to have a launch title, at least one big one, and I think that's going to be Crackdown, because I think they'd be making a big, big mistake if, they just come out with Scorpio and it's like, well, yeah, you'll just get the updates for the old games, and then the new games that come out will just look better. I think that'd be dumb, and I don't think that they're dumb. I don't think Phil Spencer is dumb. So I feel like that's where they're going with this.
Yeah, I agree. That's the ideal situation, but you can't always make things line up how you want. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to delay that game or delay Scorpio just to make it line up so that it's a day one.
I don't know
what
if they wouldn't. I don't think they'd delay Scorpio for that game, but I do think they might have delayed this game because it's been so long already. Why not just push it till Scorpio? Nobody's like dying for Crackdown at this point, and
it's not Halo or Gears. Yeah, those games.
Yeah, and I feel, but it is a AAA title for them, and I do feel that when I mentioned you need a launch game with this thing, I don't think it can be Sea of Thieves. I don't think it could be a combination of a bunch of indies with Cuphead below and Tacoma. I think you need at least one big AAA experience.
I do think I think it's going to work out. It's set up in such a way that it will
line up. And Forza will be there for the launch too.
That's exactly what I was going to say next. Is they also have Forza, which would be a great great thing to show off Scorpio with. So I think, Crackdown does come out this fall, and it's their big showpiece for Scorpio. But I also agree with you, Jordan, that it's definitely not going to be exclusive to Scorpio. I don't know. Like Phil said it several times that Scorpio will not get exclusive games, right? And I don't think.
But that's going to be. It's still going to be interesting how all that goes down, because I don't think it's as cut and dry as they've tried to make it, because they were trying to appease Xbox One owners for as long as possible, and I do feel like there's going to be something there where it's like, Scorpio, you only get these parts on Scorpio, or you only only these accessories or whatever work with Scorpio. I don't know, something I feel like is going to separate that.
I think Phil's too like honest and too good of a person that if he wasn't sure, he would have said the plan right now is to not have exclusive games for Scorpio. But he said it very like two different interviews I heard him say, like matter of factly, like Xbox One is still one family and all the games will work on each other, right? And if they did change the direction there, that's like not necessarily a lie, because they could have literally changed. It could have been true at the time, but that looks real bad on him, and I don't think he's someone who would want that look.
I feel like it's going to be something. I don't think they're going to have exclusive games, but I think it's going to have exclusive something.
Well, I think that they're going to do it in a way where it's staggered, where when the Scorpio comes out, there isn't exclusive stuff, but in a year or two, if they are going the iteration avenue, once the next iteration comes out, then it'll be this game works on Scorpio 2 and Scorpio, and then you can bring all of your Xbox One games, your library transfers. I think that's what they'll do. It'll be a staggered thing. I do think eventually there's going to be a cutoff point.
I gotta say, I'm somewhat worried about it, because of the fact that it's kind of the PS3 situation when, like, perfect example is Persona. Persona 5 looks like a fucking PS2 game at some points, but really, it looks like a PS3 game that's on PS4, and you can tell. I mean, it's a big, big gap between what Persona 5 looks like, and Horizon's like the best looking game ever. But even like Neo, which is not the Souls games, and now Neo, they're not known for their graphical fidelity, and there's such a big gap there, and between that and Persona 5. I'm just talking about PlayStation exclusives, but I think you're going to see that on Xbox, where it's like, it's just going to suck if the Xbox One is holding Scorpio back, because it does seem like a freaking beefcake. It does seem like it could really, if you took that leash off that is the Xbox One, that it could really tear some stuff up.
Yeah, but I do think that since the PS4 Pro and Scorpio to some extent are more premium products, I think that a majority of developers are currently still going for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So I don't think it's necessarily... Yeah. I understand where you're coming from holding it back, but I do think that it's going to be a thing where, okay, we have to create the Xbox One version and the PS4 version, whatever. But then the developers see all of the room they have, especially on the Scorpio. They have some room with the PS4 Pro, but even more on the Scorpio of like, okay, now we can just turn all of these up to maximum, So it's like, I think it's going to be a different thing there, and it's going to be interesting. So we talked about Crackdown 3. You guys touched on Forza Motorsport 7, which we don't know exists, but we know exists, right? A new console releasing, there's a new racing game. Shocker, those two line. Next up, though, so with the console release, though this is an iteration, it is a console release and they want it to sell. And unlike a slim version, this is I think 4 newer experiences, obviously. And I do think that having a well-rounded launch of games is very good. So Crackdown 3 is going to be the shooter, the action game, right? Probably the thing that shows off the hardware. Forza Motorsport 7, also the game that shows off the hardware. Racing games aren't for everybody, though, neither are shooters. Sea of Thieves, I think, is going to be huge. I've been fortunate enough to be in beta and alpha test for that. Due to NDA, I can't really talk about it. But I do think Sea of Thieves is a multiplayer game that can scratch a different itch, right? Especially depending on price point, stuff like that. I do think it's a game that people are saying that it's a game that you'll play for one weekend and never play again. But people did that with Destiny. People did that with The Division. It's the core audience, the hardcore audience that stays there that makes that game live, right? So if they can capture that core audience, I think it'll be fine. And I do think it has a lot of tools in place to do that. It's a multiplayer game where you essentially just have fun being a pirate, right? And I doubt there will be a strong narrative. I think a lot of it's just based on exploration and having fun. It's Minecraft minus building plus pirates, and I think that's cool.
I agree with you, Jared, but I think that it's gonna be niche. I think it's gonna have its audience like The Division or Destiny, but just way, 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 way smaller.
Yeah, I mean it depends because like it's tough because there aren't really many games on Xbox or even PlayStation that are multiplayer that look like this. Like it's very kid friendly. I mean, it's not like childish, but it is very kid friendly, and I do think
I would actually go with the descriptor of childish.
yeah, I guess childish, but it's more. It does have some crass parts, right? It's not like Nintendo childish. They do have there is some willingness to make some like some crass jokes and stuff like that. So it's gonna be interesting. Excuse me. The next one up is State of Decay 2, which I think also scratches another itch and will also be niche, but I think can find some success. State of Decay, the first game was a hit. It was a zombie game where you went around this open world and found survivors and found resources and ran around. State of Decay 2, the big thing they're focusing on is multiplayer. And the fact that you can play with up to 4 friends in this world, find survivors, find resources, move from location to location. One of the coolest aspects of this game is that they announced that the game's going to launch with one big map, and that's like the retail map, right? The game. But what they're planning on doing is adding areas to the game. So kind of like in The Walking Dead, where Walking Dead's always about progression and moving forward, right? That's what they want their game to feel like, where you have these early areas where you're like, you're getting used to the zombie apocalypse and how the world works. But as the game goes on, things kind of get a little bit more difficult. But if you know what you're doing, you can kind of manage, right? And they're going to be introducing more maps and stuff. I think it's really cool. I think zombies still play really well if they're done right. And I think that this game can be good. This is a game, I think, that is all dependent on its marketing. Like, if they have a very solid marketing campaign, this can definitely hit that PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds where it's like, if you look at the game on its own, it's like, how is this even a AAA game in terms of sales and critical success? But then you just look at like an audience attached to it, right? And unlike Sea of Thieves, where I think Sea of Thieves has a huge... You're right, and I think it has a huge probability of being more of a niche game. Some people play here and there, and there's a dedicated community. I think State of Decay 2 does have a chance to be big if Microsoft gets behind it. I think it has a lot there.
I disagree with the getting big part if Microsoft puts a lot behind it. I think that kind of ties into the bigger issue that I was about to bring up, which is that with Microsoft canceling what, in my opinion, seemed like 3 AAA titles in Phantom Dust, Scalebound, and Fable Legends, I think that's all fine and good if that's what they wanted to do and those games weren't coming together like they thought, but now it's forcing them to rely on these games that are not even close to AAA, in my opinion, being Sea of Thieves and State of Decay, and then even like Cuphead. These games that they're just leaning on to be flagship titles that just aren't able to be flagship titles, no matter how much you put behind them and no matter how many people you get in on that first weekend with, first 5 hours free or, free multiplayer weekend, whatever the hell it is. I just don't think that those are broad enough games to gather that much of an audience.
I have to strongly disagree with you in terms of I would say, yeah, it's not a flagship game, but Nier Automata sold extremely well. That game is not a AAA game, and
it could be a Nier. I can see that.
Yeah, I think you're kind of doing a disservice to the development. I think you just don't know enough about State of Decay.
Jared, you gotta look at the console that Nier Automata came out on. I mean, there's a lot bigger install base, so it has room to spread out. But when you're, I don't even think Xbox One's at 30 million at this point, and so that's just a fraction of the size of the people that would even be picking up something like Nier or State of Decay and even thinking about it.
On the same note, though, Nier came out in a heap, in the middle of a heap of tons of PS4 exclusives. I don't know. I think State of Decay will do really well on Xbox too. Plus, it's on PC also.
I mean, you're talking about an audience that's been clamoring for a new Left 4 Dead game, and they're never getting that. Valve doesn't make video games anymore.
Yeah, there's zombie games, but other than that, Left 4 Dead and State of Decay are wildly different.
I understand that, but I do think that how would I say this? Fable Legends wouldn't have. I wouldn't consider Fable Legends to be a AAA game. I played the beta of that game. That game, though it had a AAA studio attached to it, that game wouldn't have sold very well. I don't think. Like, that game would have the expectation of selling what State of Decay 2 can, and I think that a lot of people, because I understand the install base issue, and like I understand that there's way more PS4s out there, but the thing is that how would I phrase this? Just because they're quality games on a console that hasn't sold as much doesn't mean that they don't have a chance to be successful. And I think people are way more willing to say that game A, B, and C on PlayStation are going to be successful because of this and this. And we've had games that have come out that haven't really been successful, but they're automatically touted as they're going to be because they're on PlayStation. Whereas it seems like there's this pessimism towards Xbox of like, well, no, that can't be it, or that can't be it, or that can't be it. And the problem Xbox has from people is that people constantly talk about, all they ever talk about is Halo and Gears and Halo and Gears. And then when they try to introduce new stuff, people shoot it down right away. And a lot of the PlayStation exclusives this year that have been really good, I wouldn't consider Nier a AAA game by any means.
No, I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't consider Neo a AAA game by any means.
No, they're double A games,
and they're
for
successful.
Sure. I just think that going back to my original point there, it was just that they're leaning on these games as if they were. You would never see Sony come out and say, well, Neo and Nier, those are our big fall games. Those are our big flagship titles.
That goes to them not having a lot of
Microsoft.
Exclusives. Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Right. I think, Microsoft isn't necessarily saying, hey, State of Decay, that's our big flagship title. But you can tell whenever somebody's like, hey, man, what the fuck? You just canceled Scalebound and we're not getting any AAA games over here. And they're like, well, guys, we got State of Decay coming. It's like Sony would never say that shit. Sony would be like, well, guys, we got Horizon coming. We got Uncharted coming. We got these giant titles coming,
That's because they don't have to right now.
Yeah.
And sure, but you just wouldn't see Sony leaning on that.
Yeah.
Well, and they also both have different, I think, philosophies towards conferences now, too. Like, the PlayStation conference was great, don't get me wrong. But I forgot who was on a podcast. It might have been Easy Allies or somebody. They were talking about, like, the PlayStation conference was great, but it was a trailer for the next 5 to 6 years, which is fantastic. But you have to understand that some of those games are kind of not close, right? Whereas a lot of the other conferences, a majority of their announcements were games that came out soon. But I do agree with you that, like, the problem isn't that State of Decay 2 can't be successful. It's that Xbox needs a deeper catalog. And I think before we get into the predictions, because we're getting close to the end of the podcast here, what I simply want from you guys, and you guys can dive in a little bit, but I don't want like drastic conversations. I'm going to name a game or an idea, and I want you guys to simply say if you think if it's going to be on Xbox's stage, okay? And you can give a little bit more if you want to, but let's not try to go too long. Far Cry 5, will this be on Xbox's stage?
No.
Yes.
Okay. I'm with you, Jordan. I think it's going to be on their stage.
I also think it'll be on Sony's as well.
Assassin's Creed Origins.
Yes.
I think
flipped.
I think Microsoft gets the marketing rights to this.
Nah, man. It's Sony for sure. Okay. I mean, the Ubisoft is not a company that would be able to justify something like that. Ubisoft is all about the bucks, and for Microsoft to be getting exclusives with that install base, and it is very important.
No, not exclusive. I'm saying marketing, not exclusive.
No, well, exclusive marketing rights means that they're probably going to have DLC, right? Like, yeah. You get your, Ezio costume on Xbox or whatever. And I just don't see that happening, especially since PlayStation has had that going with Assassin's Creed for years now.
My only argument, and the only reason I could see this happening, is that Assassin's Creed has been a franchise tarnished by its performance issues, right? People see the performance issues of Unity and the internet goes crazy. I'm not saying they're justified, but it is a point where whenever people bring up Assassin's Creed, there's always the person in the corner that's like, well, is it going to be broken, right? Which isn't justified,
yeah, you
but
said
it is
right.
a conversation.
It's been tarnished.
Yeah. So I think Ubisoft could definitely see Scorpio as a potential, look at our new Assassin's Creed game running phenomenally and looking crazy good. And that's one of the things that's kind of like one of those turning points of it's, for me, if I was in business, I would definitely go for PlayStation over Xbox just because of the install base. But from a developer standpoint, I want my game to be showcased the best, right? So I would want my game to look the best or perform the best when it's shown. So it's a tough thing there. Obviously, you're probably going to be correct, and it's probably going to be on PlayStation, but I do think that there is a possibility.
I think that the performance stuff is really like Scorpio's not going to help that. You know, I think the reason that Unity was so fucking broken is because they wanted to have a game out every year, and that game wasn't ready to
go. Destiny 2, no. I think this is... It's weird. I think this could be the thing that shows up at every conference, but I could definitely see this being stranglehold by PlayStation.
Yeah,
and it's like,
absolutely.
we want to show it, so...
It's an exclusive, right?
Absolutely not going to be at Xbox.
I would say there's a 0% chance this will only be at Xbox. Is the absolute guarantee. This one I think will be only shown at Xbox, just because I don't think PlayStation would want to make room for it, and that's Shadow of War. I think this game's going to be good. I hope it's good. And we've seen that it already has a deal with Microsoft, and it could be a game you could see in PlayStation, but it's one of those games that I don't think PlayStation cares about making a room for. You know, it's like people
totally
buy it on PlayStation, but we're not going to make room for it.
No, Jared, I'm glad you brought this one up because this is the first game confirmed with Scorpio support. Yeah. So I think this, going back to our other conversation, this is going to be another showpiece for Scorpio. So to corroborate what you're saying, this is 100% going to be at Microsoft's stage.
Yeah. Do we see Call of Duty?
So I just wanted to say that I think Shadow of War is actually going to have a pretty big demo at Microsoft.
Yeah, I do too.
Call of Duty, I think Sony's been making lots of time for for Battlefront, for Destiny, and for Call of Duty at any conference that they can talk about.
But all three?
That stuff they have been. Yeah,
like
pretty
they
much,
would have
man.
to have
I mean, they
No, I'm saying
if you look at
this is the first time I think all three of them are releasing in the same year. So do you think they're going to dedicate time to all three? They're going to dedicate a big block to Destiny 2. I guess, because, sorry to interrupt you, but last year was the hype trailer of all these games, and some of them are staggered. I think now they have the benefit of throwing in follow-ups on God of War and Spider-Man, but also having a bunch of third-party, right? So it's kind of like people won't get mad if they don't see a game they saw last year because they're going to have all of this crazy stuff with third-party. So I think you do have a point.
If you look at PlayStation Experience, they made a lot of time for... the year the Battlefront came out, they had the exclusive Darth Vader console, and then Black Ops 3, they had that ugly-ass orange-looking thing console. So, yeah, they've been making lots of time for these guys. The PlayStation Reveal event when Destiny, they were just all up on...
Is it going to be at Microsoft, though? Is COD going to be at Microsoft, do you think, in any capacity?
Yes.
No, that's what I'm saying, is these games are going to be so showcased at Sony that Sony might even say, like, you guys need to stay off Microsoft stage because we want people to, we want mainstream people to almost think that it's not coming out on Xbox.
And also, this goes back to the thing of, like, Microsoft's going to have to walk a fine line of supporting their third parties, but also, I'm going to jump ahead here, like, we need to see new exclusives, and I don't think we need to see 10 by any means, but we do need to see maybe some new IPs or maybe some follow-ups or some stuff, right? We need to see some Microsoft specific stuff. And this question, and it could be a simple yes or no, will we see a new first-party Microsoft IP?
What I was gonna actually, I took this out of my predictions, but I was gonna say we'd see like minimum like 4 new Microsoft exclusive IPs, not necessarily first party.
Jesus Christ, Tom!
Not new IP though, right? Just exclusives, 4 exclusives.
I was gonna say at least 4 new IP exclusives, like new things, not necessarily first party, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because they, that's a whole shit ton for one publisher,
yeah.
But I think they're just pulling them in right now, and I just think we don't know about it yet. I think the bow is about to break. I think it's like they have to, right?
Yeah, and I
thought that was an easy one.
And I think Phil Spencer has done a good job of communicating that he's trying to all the improvements they've done, he cares about the gamers, and Phil Spencer's not a dumb guy. I think he's like, he probably went up to the ups at Microsoft and he's like, hey, I know you guys, Microsoft's Xbox is doing well. We think we can do great. We want to go out. We want to be aggressive, and we'll see.
Me a check. Yeah,
see,
exactly.
I got to be devil's advocate here. I don't think either of you guys are correct. I think that they haven't, going into this generation, the plan wasn't to to cancel these games and shut down Lionhead and shut down the partnership with Platinum. I just think that this stuff is still kind of fresh, especially Scalebound, and I don't think they've had enough time to build up a stable of other exclusives, be it third party or first party or not.
I think that's fair.
And I also think that was never their thing, and I don't think that, like I said, it's the fact that people are just really on Microsoft right now about their exclusives. I still don't know. I mean, Quantum Break really wasn't very successful. I just don't think that that's at the forefront of their mind.
I mean, my counter argument to that is that Phil Spencer's been there for a while, right? And Phil Spencer has talked about numerous times that, and he kind of threw jabs at Sony without throwing jabs at Sony, of like, he believes, and with Scalebound especially, and even before that they've learned that you can't show off stuff until it's done, right? And like I think they've learned that you kind of have to let stuff baking. So that can go one of two ways. Either they are gathering up the third party and first party exclusives, but they're so early on, and Phil Spencer's new approach is we don't want to announce anything yet, right? So we're in the position where we're not going to see anything new yet because it's not ready yet. Or it could be in the position of the moment he took over, he might have already seen that the stable is kind of weak. Like, Phil Spencer is a gamer, and that's one thing that I think that why he comes across so genuine to people like us is because he's kind of like us, right? Much older, obviously, much more successful and rich, but he's like us. And it could be that they have some stuff brewing, and they've had stuff brewing that we don't know about. I think new IP is kind of crazy. I do think 4 exclusives could be possible, but as far as 4 new IP, I think that's
4 exclusives. I think about it, like Forza, Crackdown, Sea of Thieves.
No, new.
I mean,
we're talking about new.
So a new exclusive, say
unannounced.
Halo 6.
Well, no, that we already. How would I guess that would work. Halo 6 is a new exclusive we don't know exists yet, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's stuff that we don't know yet. Whereas new IP is properties that haven't existed yet. They're brand new creations.
And we know Halo 6 isn't going to be there, based on what 343 has said. They've said that they're going to have a little something that isn't related to Halo 6 at the conference, and so that's official confirmation there.
So lastly, before we get into the predictions, because we are running a little long, pretty much yes or no answers. Need for Speed. The only reason I would say no that we see it is because of Forza Motorsport 7, and it would be kind of weird to have 2 racing games, right? So yeah, I would say I would lean no on Need for Speed. What about you?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
This one is a no. The only reason I wrote this down is because of the Gwent announcement last year. So they do have a little bit of a relationship, but I don't even think we see this game anywhere, much less Microsoft. Cyberpunk 2077. I don't think we see that game at all. So that was just something I wrote down, just an idea. So the guy who made Super Meat Boy, the partners, one of them went on to make Binding of Isaac, right? He recently was talking about his new game that we'll see soon. Super Meat Boy had a partnership with Xbox. It was just an idea I threw out there of maybe we see that in the demo reel of like his new game, right? He's a very accomplished developer.
That's one of the new IPs, one of the 4. Boom.
Yeah, boom. And lastly, the one I've been talking about, if this is a prediction for any of you, we can just end the conversation, but a partnership with Marvel. I've been talking about, I hope this happened. I really hope that, Xbox saw what Marvel's doing with all these different companies, especially Sony. But, all these Square Enix and stuff, and they're like, hey, we want to do something. Like, we see you're giving it to people, and we have these studios that are very talented. Do you guys think we'll see a Marvel partnership?
No, but probably something Marvel at on their stage, right? Maybe the Square Avengers game or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Man. Oof.
I'm going to say no. I think that the Square stuff is way too new. They're not even close to.
I would say
I think they're just now starting production, like pre-pro on those games, and so no.
I would love to see if one of Microsoft's third-party studios that they kind of work with constantly, if they partner up with Marvel and they do like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. That would be pretty cool.
Say I think it'd be real dangerous of Marvel to go with an exclusive on Xbox for any of their properties, because it makes sense on PlayStation with the install base, but it does not at all with Xboxes, even with Scorpio coming up. And
but you're also forgetting that it's going to be playable on PC as well. So
yeah, that's true.
Spider-Man?
Good point.
No, I'm talking about any Microsoft exclusive. More than likely, is going to be a Play Anywhere title, meaning it's more than likely going to also be playable on PC. So I don't think.
But more than even the install base, I think I just think it'd be weird to be like, for Marvel to be like, all right, Sony, here's your Spider-Man. That's going to be exclusive over there. Now, Microsoft, you're going to make an Iron Man game. That's going to be exclusive over there. I just don't think you want to play like. I don't think you want to hire 2 different babysitters for your kids, you know? I don't know. I just don't see them dividing up. I don't think they want to keep dividing up their stable, or I think it would be dangerous.
The Spider-Man thing was just a lucky thing for Sony because they own something. I don't know.
I have to strongly disagree with you guys. I think Marvel's more than willing to just, here you have this. If you're paying us enough money, here you have this. I don't think it's as... where they're like, okay, Sony, you can have that because you own Spider-Man, so we're kind of cool with you on that. I really think that their willingness to sign a deal with Square Enix, who have had numerous failed games, and like I just think that I could easily see it happening. I don't think it's as far fetched, and maybe not not where Spider-Man is exclusive. I don't think it'd be a game where it solely focuses on one hero. I think a Marvel exclusive game could be the Marvel Ultimate Alliance or something like that, Not necessarily like the Iron Man game or the Thor game or something. I think it's going to be like a roster-based game of like something. I think now we'll get into predictions. This is where the money's made. So, who wants to go first?
I do.
Okay.
I got one that I've been just waiting to get out, and I feel like no one seems to be saying it, even though to me it's like the most obvious, and I think this is 100% lock. I think this is, out of all the predictions I'll ever make, this is going to be correct more likely than anything. Scorpio is, to me, it's so obviously going to be called Xbox One E. That's it.
Why
What?
E?
One E. That's
the
it.
hell are you talking about?
I think it's the most obvious thing in the world.
I don't get it. What does the E stand for?
1E?
So 1S, that's a moniker for Xbox One Slim, right?
Yeah.
But cooler. So I think 1E is, I think that's just so easy because they've said this is a part of the Xbox One family. So to me, the 1 absolutely is going to be there. And the E is just for Elite, right?
Oh, no, man. First of all, Elite, that's going to be confusing because the Xbox 360 Elite was an Xbox 360. It just looked different. It had a bigger hard drive.
That's the beauty of it, though, is it's just E. Plus, that's not too far off from how they're sort of still marketing the thing. It's still in the Xbox One family.
So you want to throw a price in there, or are you just going name?
Just going name. Get
Okay.
specific and on the name.
Jordan, you're up
I
next.
feel like that's just going to make the whole X-Bone joke even worse, where it's like X-Boney. Like, it's like because they spell out 1. Xbox One is not the number, it's O-N-E.
Yeah, right.
So it's going to be O-N-E space E. I don't know, man.
Jordan, it's your prediction.
Okay, so I think that we're going to see something akin to the custom controllers. I think that you're going to see another accessory thing that's like really customizable. So I'm thinking, I know that Xbox One S doesn't have faceplates, but I think that you're going to be able to customize the look of your Scorpio like quite a bit, actually. I think they're going to have like modular, not modular parts as in like, oh, you can, change out the graphics card, but I think the casing will be modular.
Interesting.
And then, certain special editions of games will come with their own casing or whatever. I just feel like they see how, like, gamers want to customize their shit,
Yeah.
Gamers love having a customized controller or, a light bar sticker on your PS4 controllers, your DualShocks, so I think that they realize now that that's a big thing that people really like. So I think that's what you'll get.
So my first prediction, I'll just go head to head with you, Dom. I think because, and you said it's so obvious, I think this is so obvious. Every time we hear Phil Spencer talk about Project Scorpio, what does he refer to it as? A premium product. Premium.
Xbox One P.
Premium, yes. So I'm going Xbox One P. My other guess was Xbox One Titan, but I think it's a little too PC. Not politically correct.
I don't think it's going to say it's not going to be Xbox One anything because, like I said, you're going to be confusing the shit out of people, especially moms that are trying to buy this for Christmas and such. Like,
I think you'll confuse people more.
It's going to be Xbox. I think it's going to be Xbox something else. Xbox Scorpio. Xbox.
I think it's going to
Millennium. Whatever.
They have to. They're going to keep if they stick to the truth of like. They want to make sure everybody's included. They're going to want to make sure everybody's included with having it the same name with something at the end.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be more confusing if it was just like, the worst they could do is just call Xbox One and then have a higher price on it. Because then it gets very... So they're either going to have Xbox One a different letter, or it's going to be something like you said where it's Xbox something, right? So I'm just going to go head-to-head with Dom, though, and I'm going to say Xbox One.
I like that, though. That's a good one.
Your second prediction, Dom.
So we almost got to this earlier, but I'm thinking we all kind of agree that we're gonna have Oculus in some capacity working with at least Scorpio. I do think that we get Fallout 4 VR exclusive to Oculus on Xbox and PC. I guess basically not on PSVR is the dividing line there.
Yeah, well, if it's exclusive to Oculus, then it won't be on PSVR. But if they have a partnership with Xbox, then it will be on Xbox. I get what you're saying. Yeah. Bonus points. This won't count towards you getting it right or wrong. What do you think the price for Fallout VR will be?
I think it's just... Good question. I think if you... I haven't thought this through. I think it's cheap. But if you already own Fallout 4, they might work something out for you. I'll have to think that through.
Okay. Jordan, what's your second prediction?
So we did actually kind of already talk about this, but I want to go deeper. I think that... I don't know. Okay. I definitely think that we're going to have an Oculus partnership going on, but I feel like... I'm starting to think that it may be a totally different Oculus. Does that make any sense?
Like it's going to be an Oculus VR thing that's exclusive to work on the Xbox. Like the one that works with PC is a different unit, is what you're saying. Right,
and I think that you'll still... Like all the games will still work. All the accessories will still work. But it's just a different unit. It's like specifically made for the Scorpio.
Yeah.
And it specifically, has features that you can't do on PC or that are better suited for the console itself.
So if you own an Oculus today for PC, it won't work with Scorpio?
Absolutely not, because it's a PC Oculus. I think that, but all, like I said, all the games will be the same, all the accessories. So I don't know. It's weird, man, because you can't just be like, oh well, all Oculuses will work on Scorpio because.
Well, it's an excuse to also make a new version because we talked about iteration. VR headsets are things that need to reiterate over and over again, right? Like PSVR is good, but it could be better, right? Not as many cords, all this stuff. I think it's an easy excuse too. Like, hey, we've been, obviously not now, but like a year ago or a year and a half ago, they're like, well, let's work on version 2 of the headset. And they never really had any motivation. Then Microsoft comes and like, let's partner. And they're like, okay, well, we're actually working on a new version. And Microsoft's like, well, we wanted to work with our new Xbox. And then they start, you know what I mean? I think that's a smart call. So I just wrote down for your guesses, Oculus, Xbox, new version, I guess is the best way to put it. So for me, I have a bunch of predictions. So I'm trying to go through here. I'll throw out one that I'm not going to use just because I think it's interesting. One of my predictions was that Crackdown 3, State of Decay 2, and Sea of Thieves all come out this fall, which I don't think is crazy. I could easily see one of those falling to next year, especially like Sea of Thieves. I could see that being spring next year. But that was one of my predictions. I'm not going to go with that one, though. I think my last one, I think, is going to be my craziest one. I think this one's a little crazy, too. Sorry, I'm just trying to debate what I want to go with.
I'll jump in if you want.
No, because you guys already did 2 each. So I want to make sure we just go in line so I don't have to double time it. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. I know what I went with. Earlier we talked about Killer Instinct and kind of how Microsoft's fallen away from that. Like they did a couple of seasons and they kind of fallen away from updating Killer Instinct, right? I think it was a good game. It performed really well for them. But I do think that Xbox is missing a fighting game, right? Like, Street Fighter is synonymous with PlayStation. They showed off Tekken last year, but Tekken is like, it's a third-party game. That comes up for everything. If anything, I relate Tekken more to PlayStation than Xbox, right?
Yeah, Tekken's been at the PlayStation conferences, hasn't it? Like,
no,
I know it was at PSX.
Last year it was at Xbox. It was at PlayStation as well, but it was at Xbox, which is kind of weird. But I think a franchise that can return, and I don't think this will be exclusive as far as it only comes out on this platform, but I do think there will be something exclusive for Xbox, is I think we see Soul Calibur 6. 5, sorry. No, 6. Yeah, 6. I'm right. Soul Calibur 6 at Xbox's stage. I think it's a good reveal of, for people who know what Soul Calibur is and for people who don't know what Soul Calibur is, because it's a fighting game with interesting characters, and it's a game in which you can make it feel like an Xbox exclusive with an Xbox character thrown in or something like that. Maybe they do the crazy thing where, Soul Calibur comes out for all of them and they have an exclusive character on each. That would be cool. I think that'd be awesome. But I could easily see us seeing Soul Calibur there. So
really quick, I just want to say Soul Calibur is a fucking dope name.
Yeah, I like how they do it, where like their fighting games have like weird quests too, where you can get weapons for characters. If you guys remember when we had the 3 characters that were exclusive to each system, that was pretty cool too. Especially Link being in a Soul Calibur game was really weird. Yeah, so that's my second prediction. Dom, what's your third one?
I said this when we were doing predictions overall for 2017 back in December. I'll say it again here. I think we see a new Fable game at E3.
Okay.
Like a mainline. I don't think it's a numbered. I don't think it's Fable 4, but I think it's Fable, colon
something,
whatever subtitle. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's plausible.
It's an easy one.
Yeah, exactly. That's also a game that, like, even if though I would want to see gameplay, they could easily get away with just a cinematic trailer, right? And pull on people's heartstrings of wanting a new Fable. So I think that could be something that's early in development, but is like this is coming, So, Jordan, what's your last prediction?
So I think that, to be perfectly honest, I feel like I just can't see any monetary reason for Marvel to make an exclusive. This has to do with my prediction.
All right. Did I go back in time?
I can't see any reason for Marvel to have an exclusive Xbox game monetarily, but I can see plenty of other licenses, or plenty of other licensees, I should say, or licensors. I don't know. Fucking A. I don't know. Anyways, I think you're absolutely going to see some other type of license game at Xbox. Maybe a smaller scale franchise that's like, hey, Sony doesn't really want to fuck with us. They don't really care enough to fuck with us. But it'd still be great to have our game on Xbox.
Okay, so licensed game that's not Marvel is what I'm writing down. Yeah. For my third prediction, I kind of want to go directly at you and say no Marvel game is happening. But I have a couple of other ideas. So I was debating between what is actually going to be my third prediction and them announcing another non-mainline Halo game, which I think is really plausible. The fact that they've already stated that they're not releasing Halo 3 Anniversary, and they're not showing off Halo 6. But they've stated like there's stuff in the works, and they've been really like cagey about it. Reach was huge with people. ODST was a mixed bag. Halo Wars 2 I don't think is a direct correlation because it is in the Halo universe, but it's not a Halo game. You know what I mean? It's not a shooter. So that was one of my predictions, is that there may be a non-mainline Halo game, but I'm kind of going away from that because I want to do something a little bit more bold, I guess. So my prediction is that it's going to be the return of the Summer of Arcade. If you guys don't remember, Summer of Arcade was a huge event for Xbox and Xbox 360. Every year during the summertime, they had a release of a bunch of indie games, fantastic indie games. That's where Super Meat Boy debuted, Castle Crashers, Limbo, a bunch of games. Like, Summer of Arcade was huge. And I think over the course of this generation, both Sony and Microsoft have had partnerships with indie devs, and we talked about indie devs, but I don't think they've made it enough of a case to make events specifically for releases for indie games, right? Like these big events. And I think Phil Spencer realizes that Summer of Arcade was huge for Xbox because it made indie games an event and it made people care about indie games more, right? more than just us three that know about indie games and talk about them, it made indie games matter to the general gamer, quote unquote. So my prediction is that Summer of Arcade returns. Not only does it return, it's going to come out with Below's going to release, Cuphead's going to release, Tacoma's going to release, Pitfall's going to release, which is the Behemoth game. Those are 4 stud games. If they come out and they're good. Cuphead's the only question mark. I think Tacoma's going to be a fantastic game no matter what. Below, I have faith in Cappy. Pitfall, Behemoth makes great games too. Cuphead, I think, will be good, but it's going to depend on how tough that development process has been. But I do think that it might not be those 4 games specifically, but I do think Summer of Arcade returns, and I do think it is a good launch into Scorpio. I think that they're going to make an event out of it of this game comes out, this game comes out, this game comes out. Xbox is the place to play the indies, and we're proving it by showcasing this event. So that's my
Well, Sony certainly wasn't helping out the indies last year, so if anybody is, it's got to be Xbox,
Exactly. And I had a bunch of other things, like as far as like I thought of like a Viva Pinata reboot, Blue Dragon sequel.
Oh fuck, that'd be dope. I'd love a Viva Pinata reboot. I think they should do that. Those were good selling games.
My other prediction that I had a tough time not saying was I could easily see Xbox making a Banjo-Kazooie remaster. Just making those games beautiful again, especially they've seen the fervor for Crash and they've seen the fervor for Yooka-Laylee. Though Yooka-Laylee didn't turn out to be everything people wanted, though it was exactly what they wanted. They just don't remember that Banjo wasn't as good as they remember. But I do think that Microsoft could pull on those heartstrings too of like going back to them having exclusives for people. They own Banjo-Kazooie, make a remaster. That doesn't take a lot of investment as far as money. It doesn't take a lot of investment in terms of time, but it does get you a lot of goodwill, right? And Phil Spencer knows how to earn goodwill, so I could have definitely seen a Banjo remaster. And then the last thing I wrote down was Devil May Cry. Like, I could definitely see that showing up on Microsoft stage. Because that's one of those games that, like, Sony has a bunch of other games that are going to be bigger that they're like, we would like to have, like, kind of like Shadow of War. It's like, we would like to have Devil May Cry, but we just don't have room for it. Sorry. You know what I mean? Yeah, but I think we went pretty long on Xbox, which is good because we had a lot to talk about. I think you guys can agree with me or disagree with me. I think this E3 is the most important to Xbox. PlayStation is kind of like they don't want to fail or do bad or anything, but they don't need to do anything crazy and they'll still be fine as far as in terms of eyes of gamers. I think Nintendo is in a good place. They do need to win people over for the future of Switch, but I think Xbox, because of all of the talk of them not having exclusives and all this stuff, I do think maybe it's not the most important to them, but they have the most ground to make up. I think is a better way to put that, right? They have the most to gain from this, I guess. So, we'll see. Interesting, though. I think hopefully we get some predictions right. Unfortunately, we didn't have a guest this week, but it's fine.
I agree with what you just said, by the way.
Yeah. So we're going to have a lot of other E3 podcasts coming out this week for each of the conferences. Definitely tune into those. And, yeah, we'll see you guys with the regular podcasts after E3 week, and we'll talk about everything that happened. So catch you guys next time. Bye.